My father spent the entire evening toasting my brother's promotion and mocking my aimless lifestyle, unaware that I had secretly acquired the firm weeks ago. When he finally called me a disappointment, I smiled, pulled out the acquisition papers, and fired my brother. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. I was sitting in the back of a black town car, the city lights of Chicago blurring into streaks of gold and red against the rain-slicked glass, when the text message lit up my phone. My thumb hovered over the screen, my eyes gritty from 3 days of nonstop negotiations. I had just closed the most significant deal of my career, a silent acquisition that would reshape the logistics industry in the Midwest. My company, Apex Holdings, was no longer just a player. We were the house. But the name on the screen didn't care about market caps or quarterly projections. It was Mom. Family dinner on Saturday. Mandatory. Your father has big news about Lucas. Please, Antonia, try to look presentable this time. No ripped jeans. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding, the kind of heavy, rattling sigh that seems to scrape against your ribs. The contrast was almost laughable. 10 minutes ago, I was shaking hands with a CEO who was terrified of me, a man who knew that with a stroke of a pen, I could dismantle his life's work. Now, I was being scolded about denim. I wasn't just tired, I was physically ill with exhaustion. My head pounded with a migraine that had been lurking behind my eyes since Tuesday, and my stomach churned with a mixture of caffeine and anxiety. Not anxiety about business, never that. Anxiety about them, about Winston and Philippa, about Lucas. I looked down at my outfit, a tailored Italian suit that cost more than my father's car. I hadn't worn ripped jeans in 6 years, but to them, I was frozen in time. I was 23, confused, and finding myself. They didn't know about Apex. They didn't know about the portfolio. They didn't know that the freelance consulting I told them about was actually corporate restructuring for Fortune 500s. I typed back a simple, "I'll be there." The car slowed as we approached my building, the doorman stepping out with an umbrella. I didn't move immediately. I stared at the phone, feeling that familiar, cold pit opening in my stomach. It wasn't just a dinner. It was a summons to court where the verdict had already been read. Lucas was the hero. I was the cautionary tale. I swiped to my calendar. Saturday. The same day the acquisition of Vanguard Logistics was set to be finalized internally. I paused, a strange, cold smile touching my lips. Vanguard Logistics. That was where Lucas worked. That was the big news. I leaned my head back against the leather seat, closing my eyes as the migraine pulsed. They wanted to celebrate Lucas's ascent? Fine, we would celebrate. But they had no idea that the ladder he was climbing was one I now owned. The betrayal of their indifference had always stung, but this time it felt different. This time I held the cards. As the car door opened and the cold wind hit my face, I whispered to the empty street, "Let's see who's laughing by dessert." The silence of the apartment didn't comfort me. It just echoed the truth I'd been avoiding. Their validation was the one thing I couldn't buy, and the one thing that could still hurt me more than any market crash. The drive to my parents' house in the suburbs always felt like time travel, but in the worst possible way. As the miles ticked by, shedding the steel and glass of the city for manicured lawns and identical colonials, I felt my posture slump. The confident CEO of Apex Holdings evaporated, replaced by Antonia, the disappointment. I parked my rental car, a sensible sedan I used specifically for these visits to avoid questions, around the block. I walked the rest of the way, the autumn wind biting through my coat. I needed the air. I needed to steel myself. When I walked through the front door, the smell hit me first. Roast beef and expensive red wine. The scent of success, as defined by Winston. "There she is," came the booming voice from the living room. Winston didn't get up. He was sitting in his leather armchair, a glass of scotch in one hand, gesturing wildly with the other. Lucas was sitting opposite him, looking like a younger, softer clone of our father. "Hi, Dad," I said, stepping into the room. I tried to kiss his cheek, but he was already turning back to Lucas. "Antonia, you're late," Philippa called from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. She looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my blazer. "Well, at least it's not a hoodie. But you look tired, darling. Are you eating? I worry about you with that unstable lifestyle of you." "RS. I'm fine, Mom," I said, forcing a smile. "Work has just been busy." Lucas snorted, swirling his drink. "Busy doing what, Tony? Fixing someone's Wi-Fi? Or are you influencing now?" Winston roared with laughter, slapping his knee. Now, Lucas, be nice to your sister. Not everyone is cut out for the corporate grind. Some people just need to figure things out at their own pace, even if that pace is glacial." I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, familiar and suffocating. I took a seat on the edge of the sofa, keeping my distance. "So," I said, trying to deflect the attention, "what's the big news?" Lucas sat up straighter, puffing out his chest. He adjusted his tie, a tie I recognized as a knockoff of a brand I bought for my senior partners. "Well," he began, feigning modesty, "it's not official until Monday, but I'm being promoted. Regional Director of Operations at Vanguard." Winston raised his glass. "To the director, youngest in the division, isn't that right, son?" "By 5 years, Dad," Lucas grinned. "Regional Director," I repeated slowly. My heart did a strange little flip. I knew that role. I knew it because I had just reviewed the org chart for Vanguard during the due diligence phase. The position had been vacant because the previous director was fired for embezzlement. It was a critical role, one that required high-level clearance and competence. Lucas was a mid-level manager at best. "That's a lot of responsibility," I said carefully. "And a lot of money," Winston interjected, his eyes narrowing on me. "Real money, benefits, a pension, things you should be thinking about, Antonia. You're nearly 30. It's time to stop playing pretend and get a real job. Lucas could probably get you an interview for a receptionist role. Couldn't you, son?" "Maybe," Lucas shrugged, "if she cleans up a bit." I gripped my purse tighter. Inside, tucked into the inner pocket, was a sleek, black USB drive. It contained the entire acquisition dossier of Vanguard Logistics. It contained the new organizational hierarchy I had approved yesterday. And nowhere on that hierarchy was the name Lucas. "I'm happy for you, Lucas," I lied, my voice steady. "But Vanguard, I heard rumors they were restructuring." "Rumors," Lucas scoffed, waving a hand dismissively. "The company is rock solid. We're acquiring smaller firms left and right. We're the predators, Tony, not the prey. You wouldn't understand. It's high-level strategy." I looked at him, really looked at him. He was so confident, so arrogant in his ignorance. He had no idea that the predator he worked for had just been swallowed whole. "You're right," I said softly, a ghost of a smile playing on my lips. "I probably wouldn't understand." "But you forgot one crucial thing," I thought, watching Winston pour another drink. "The predator doesn't bark, it bites." To understand why I sat there, taking their abuse while holding the keys to their destruction, you have to understand the history. You have to understand the cost of the golden child. Growing up, it was always Lucas. Lucas got the tutors. Lucas got the sports camps. Lucas got the car at 16. I got the hand-me-downs and the lectures on frugality. When I wanted to go to a specialized business program in New York, Winston laughed. "Why waste the money?" he had said. "You'll just get married and quit anyway. Lucas needs the MBA." So I did it myself. I worked 3 jobs. I took out loans. I ate ramen noodles in a studio apartment the size of a closet while Lucas was partying on Dad's credit card at a state school. When I started Apex, I did it with nothing but grit and a terrifying amount of debt. I missed holidays because I was working. I missed birthdays because I couldn't afford the flight. And they interpreted my absence as failure. They interpreted my silence as shame. Back in the living room, the air was thick with self-congratulation. Winston was in his element. He wasn't just a father, he was the architect of Lucas's success, and he wanted everyone to know it. Winston was a man who measured worth in titles and square footage. He was a mid-level executive himself, a man who had plateaued 20 years ago and spent the rest of his career bitter about it. He lived vicariously through Lucas, pushing him, molding him, and funding him. "You know," Winston said, leaning forward, his eyes fixing on me with that predatory glint I hated. "I was talking to the Johnsons yesterday. Their daughter just made partner at her law firm. She bought a house in the hills. Beautiful place." "That's nice," I murmured. "It is nice," Winston snapped. "It's respectable. Tell me, Antonia, are you still living in that? What do you call it, that shared space?" "I have my own place, Dad. I didn't mention it was a penthouse overlooking the lake." "Renting," he spat the word like a curse. "Throwing money away. Lucas is looking at properties in Oakbrook, estate lots, he's building equity." "I'm act." "Yulie looking at a boat too," Lucas added, winking at Philippa. "Something for the weekends." Winston nodded approvingly. "See, assets, wealth generation, that's what a man does, he provides, he builds." He turned back to me, his voice dropping to a faux whisper, dripping with condescension. "Antonia, look, I know it's hard for you to see your brother succeeding like this while you're struggling, but you don't have to be jealous. If you need money for rent again, just ask. We can set up a payment plan. I don't want you on the street." I hadn't asked for money since I was 18. "I don't need money, Dad." "Everyone needs money," Winston barked, slamming his hand on the armrest. "Stop being so proud. It's pathetic. You have no assets, no career, no husband. You're almost 30 and you have nothing to show for it. Do you know how embarrassing it is when people ask what you do? I have to tell them you're consulting. It sounds like you're unemployed." He stood up, pacing the room, his face flushing red. This was the antagonist I knew, the man who couldn't lift himself up without pushing someone else down. "And now," he gestured to Lucas, "now that Lucas is a director, the gap is it's embarrassing, Antonia. Frankly, I'm worried you're going to try to leech off him, so let me make this clear right now." He stopped in front of me, looming over the sofa. "Lucas's money is his. You are not to ask him for loans. You are not to guilt him into paying your bills. He has a reputation to maintain, and he can't have his deadbeat sister dragging him down." I felt a cold calm wash over me. It was the same calm I felt before a hostile takeover. The emotional part of me, the daughter who wanted his love, quietly stepped back, and the CEO stepped forward. "I have no intention of taking Lucas's money," I said, my voice dangerously even. "Good," Winston sneered, "because he's going to be a very powerful man. Vanguard is the future, and you're just figuring life out." He turned his back on me to refill his drink. "Let's go to the dining room. I bought a bottle of Dom Perignon. Too good for a regular Saturday, but perfect for a director." I stood up, smoothing the front of my blazer. I looked at Lucas, who was smirking at me, enjoying the show. He really thought he had won. He really thought he was the powerful one in the room. I walked toward the dining room, my hand brushing against my bag where the USB drive sat. They wanted to talk about Vanguard? Fine, we would talk about Vanguard. I had a few questions for the new regional director about the company's Q3 compliance audit. I checked my watch. 6:30 p.m. My CFO, David, would be sending the final confirmation email in 30 minutes. The timer had started. The dining room was a shrine to Winston's ego. The walls were painted a deep, suffocating burgundy, adorned with framed certificates of his past sales achievements from the late 90s and photos of Lucas playing varsity football. There were no photos of me. The table was set with the good china, white porcelain with gold rims that we were forbidden from touching as children. I took my seat across from Lucas. He was already loosening his tie, his face flushed with the first glass of wine. Winston sat at the head of the table, carving the roast beef with a surgical precision that felt more aggressive than culinary. "Rare for the men," Winston declared, slapping a bloody slice onto Lucas's plate. He looked at me, his lip curling slightly. And for you, Antonia, I assume you're still doing that. What was it? Vegan thing. I'm not vegan, Dad. I just prefer medium, I said, unfolding my napkin. Picky, he muttered, dropping a smaller, overcooked end piece onto my plate. Beggars can't be choosers. I stared at the gray meat. Beggars. The irony was sharp enough to cut glass. In my pocket, my phone buzzed against my thigh. It was a single vibration, the priority notification signal I had set up for David, my CFO. So, Winston boomed, pouring a heavy glug of Cabernet into his glass. Tell us about the new office, Lucas. Corner suite, view of the river. Lucas took a large bite of potatoes, chewing with his mouth slightly open. Oh, you know, it's huge, top floor. They're renovating it for me next week. I told them I wanted mahogany, not that cheap laminate stuff. Good man, Winston nodded vigorously. Executive presence. You have to demand the best to be the best. Antonia, are you listening? This is how business works. You don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate. I'm listening, I said quietly. My mind, however, was racing. Top floor. I knew the floor plans of the Vanguard building better than I knew my own apartment. I had spent the last 3 weeks analyzing their lease agreements. The top floor of the Vanguard building wasn't executive suites. It was the server room and the HVAC maintenance storage. The executive suites were on the 14th floor. Something was wrong. And the team, I asked, keeping my voice casual, how many direct reports will you have? Lucas hesitated just for a fraction of a second. He took a sip of wine to cover it. About 50, give or take, we're restructuring. 50, I repeated. That's a significant headcount for a regional director. Usually, that level manages managers, not individual contributors. Who's your VP? Lucas frowned, setting his glass down a little too hard. Why the 20 questions, Tony? You trying to learn something? Maybe write a blog post about it. Winston chuckled. She's just curious, son. It's not every day she sits at a table with a real leader. I'm just interested, I said, cutting a piece of the dry beef. It sounds like a massive opportunity. It is, Lucas snapped. My VP is Greg Miller. My internal alarm bells turned into a siren. Greg Miller. I knew that name. I had seen it on a terminate for cause list provided by the external auditors on Thursday. Greg Miller hadn't just been fired, he was being investigated for kickbacks involving vendor contracts. If Lucas was hitching his wagon to Miller, or if Miller had promised this promotion as a parting gift. Excuse me, I said, standing up abruptly. I need to use the restroom. Don't take too long, Philippa chirped from her end of the table. We're doing the toast in 10 minutes. I walked out of the dining room, feeling their eyes on my back. As soon as I rounded the corner into the hallway, I sprinted silently to the guest bathroom and locked the door. I pulled out my phone. The screen was bright in the dim room. David, CFO, transfer complete. Escrow released. You are officially the owner of Vanguard Logistics as of 6:01 p.m. EST. Congratulations, boss. I didn't smile. I typed back rapidly. Me need immediate verify. Personnel file, Lucas last name. Verify promotion to regional director authorized by Greg Miller. Check status of Miller. I watched the 3 dots dance on the screen. I looked at myself in the mirror. My face was pale, my eyes wide. I looked like the scared daughter they thought I was. I took a deep breath, smoothing my hair. You are the shark, I told my reflection. You are the one who eats the competition. The phone buzzed. David, Miller was termed effective yesterday. Cause, fraud. He had no authorization to promote. HR logs show no change for Lucas. He is listed as Logistics Coordinator II. Also, flagged for review, Lucas's department is slated for dissolution on Monday due to redundancy. He's not getting promoted, Antonia. He's getting laid off. I stared at the text. The air left the room. It wasn't just a lie. It was a delusion. Lucas was sitting in there, drinking expensive wine, bragging about a mahogany office, and on Monday morning, his security badge wasn't even going to work. But why lie so boldly? Why claim a promotion when he was about to be fired? I scrolled down. David had sent a second screenshot. It was an interoffice email from Miller to Lucas, dated 3 days ago. "Don't worry about the performance review, kid. I'll sign the promotion letter before I head out. Just make sure that loan comes through for the investment we talked about. You help me, I help you." My stomach dropped. Loan. I unlocked the bathroom door. The pieces were clicking into place, forming a picture so ugly I almost didn't want to see it. Miller was scamming Lucas. He promised a fake promotion in exchange for, what? An investment? Money. I walked back down the hall. I wasn't just investigating anymore. I was building a murder case. When I returned to the table, the atmosphere had shifted from celebratory to conspiratorial. Winston was leaning in close to Lucas, his voice low and intense. "And once the paperwork clears on Tuesday, the equity will be liquid. We can move forward with the purchase," Winston was saying. I sat down, my movements deliberate. What purchase? They both jumped slightly. Winston sat back, looking annoyed at the interruption. "Adult business, Antonia. We're discussing financial strategy." "I thought we were celebrating a promotion," I said, picking up my wine glass. I didn't drink. I just swirled the red liquid, watching the legs run down the side of the crystal. "But it sounds like you're talking about spending money." "It's an investment," Lucas said, his voice a little too high. "Dad is helping me secure a position in a private equity buy-in. It's a sure thing. Greg, my VP, set it up. But I needed a guarantor for the initial capital since my salary bump doesn't hit until next month." The trap snapped shut. It was worse than I thought. The fired VP, Miller, was using Lucas to embezzle one last chunk of cash before fleeing. And Lucas, desperate for the glory, had dragged our father into it. "A guarantor," I repeated. "Dad, what did you sign?" Winston slammed his hand on the table. "That is none of your business. You come in here with your cheap suit and empty life, and you dare question me? I signed a collateral line against the house. Because I believe in my son, I believe in his future, unlike some people." "Against the house?" My voice rose, cracking the veneer of calm. "Dad, that's everything. That's your retirement. That's the equity you've built for 30 years. And it will double in 6 months, Winston shouted. "Lucas is a director now. He's in the inner circle." "He's not," I said. The words hung in the air, stark and cold. The table went silent. Philippa stopped chewing. Lucas froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. "Excuse me," Lucas whispered, his eyes narrowing. "You're not a director, Lucas," I said, keeping my eyes locked on his. "And you're not in the inner circle. You're being played." "How dare you?" Winston hissed, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. "Jealousy is an ugly thing, Antonia, but lying, that's a new low." "I'm not lying," I said, pulling my phone out and unlocking it. "I'm trying to save you from financial ruin. Who is Greg Miller?" Lucas blinked. "I told you, he's my boss." "Greg Miller was fired on Thursday," I said, my voice steady, delivering the facts like bullet points. "He was escorted out of the building by security for vendor fraud. He didn't have the authority to promote you. The letter he gave you, it's worthless. It's not in the HR system." Lucas let out a harsh, nervous laugh. "You're crazy. You don't know what you're talking about. You don't even know anyone at Vanguard." "I know enough," I pressed. "I know that the investment he sold you is a scam. He's trying to get you to transfer cash to a shell account before he disappears. If Dad signed that loan and you transfer that money, it's gone. And the house goes with it." "Shut up," Lucas stood up, knocking his chair back. "You're just trying to ruin this for me. You can't stand that I'm successful. You can't stand that Dad is proud of me and ashamed of you." "I am ashamed," Winston roared, standing up to join him. He pointed a trembling finger at me. "You come into my house, eat my food, and spew these paranoid fantasies? You're toxic, Antonia. You're a toxic, bitter little girl." "I am telling you the truth," I insisted, gripping the edge of the table. Call HR, right now. Call the main line and ask for verification of employment for Greg Miller. I don't need to call anyone, Winston yelled. I trust my son. I trust the man who has actually achieved something. I don't trust you to walk the dog. Dad, please, I pleaded, dropping the CEO mask for a second, just the desperate daughter trying to save him from himself. The promotion isn't real. The department is being dissolved on Monday. Lucas is going to be laid off. Lucas's face went white. For a second, I saw the doubt flicker in his eyes. He knew deep down that the promotion had been too easy. He knew he hadn't earned it. But the ego is a powerful fortress. Liar, Lucas whispered, then louder, liar. Get out, Winston said. His voice was low, shaking with rage. Dad. I said get out, Winston screamed, grabbing his wine glass and hurling it. It shattered against the wall behind me, spraying red wine across the beige wallpaper like a gunshot wound. You are not welcome at this table. You are not welcome in this family until you apologize to your brother and learn your place. I sat there frozen. The wine dripped down the wall. The silence that followed was ringing in my ears. I looked at Philippa. She was looking down at her plate, refusing to meet my eyes. She wouldn't help me. She never did. Fine, I said softly. I stood up. I didn't check my clothes for wine splatters. I didn't cry. The sadness evaporated, replaced by the cold, hard steel of Apex Holdings. I'll leave, I said, reaching for my purse. But before I go, you might want to look at one thing. I don't want to look at anything you have, Winston spat, sinking back into his chair, breathing heavily. Just go. You put the house up as collateral, I said, my voice devoid of emotion now. You need to see this. I didn't wait for permission. I tapped my phone screen and cast the image to the large smart TV mounted on the wall of the dining room. The TV Winston insisted on having so he could watch the stock ticker during breakfast. The screen flickered, then displayed a crisp, high-resolution PDF. It wasn't the promotion letter. It was the Vanguard Logistics internal restructuring memo, dated for release the following Monday morning. To all staff from Office of the CEO subject, Departmental Consolidation and Redundancy Notice. Effective immediately, the Midwest Logistics Coordination Unit is dissolved. All roles within this vertical are eliminated. The following personnel are to report to HR for severance processing. The list of names scrolled down. It was short. Smith, J. Doe, R. Antonia's brother's last name Lucas. What is this? Lucas asked, his voice trembling. He squinted at the screen. That's a fake, you made that up. And this, I swiped on my phone, changing the image on the TV. It was a copy of the frantic email chain between Greg Miller and the offshore account, intercepted by my forensic accounting team during the audit. Miller, did the idiot sign the loan yet? I need the $50K by Friday or the deal is dead. The idiot, I read aloud. That's you, Lucas. Winston stared at the screen. His face was losing its color, shifting from rage red to a sickly gray. Where did you get this? I have resources, I said. Resources you know nothing about. This is impossible, Lucas stammered, backing away from the table. Greg said, he said I was his protege. He said the restructuring was to clear out the dead weight so I could build my own team. He lied to you to steal Dad's money, I said ruthlessly. And you were so desperate to look big, to be the golden child, that you didn't even check. You didn't do due diligence. You just signed. No, Lucas shouted, looking at Winston. Dad, don't listen to her. She hacked something. She's trying to sabotage the loan. Winston looked at Lucas, then at the screen, then at me. The doubt was eating him alive. He looked at the wine stain on the wall. He looked at the director, who was currently sweating through his shirt. Lucas, Winston said, his voice raspy. Did you call HR? I don't need to call HR, Lucas shrieked. I'm the director. Call them, Winston roared, slamming his fist onto the table so hard the silverware jumped. Lucas fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking so badly he dropped it once. He dialed. He put it on speaker. "Thank you for calling Vanguard Logistics. Our offices are currently closed. If you are calling to verify employment." Lucas punched in the extension. "You have reached the voicemail of Greg Miller. This mailbox is no longer in service. Goodbye." The automated voice was the only sound in the room. Lucas lowered the phone. He looked like a child who had dropped an ice cream cone. He must have changed his number because of the promotion. "He's in custody, Lucas," I said. "He was arrested at O'Hare Airport 3 hours ago." Winston put his head in his hands. "The loan," he whispered. "I signed it this morning. The wire transfer is scheduled for Monday at 9 a.m. "Cancel it," I said. "I can't," Winston looked up, his eyes hollow. "It's an irrevocable transfer, unless the bank flags it, or unless I have proof of fraud." "You have proof right there," I pointed to the TV. "But you need more than a screenshot. You need the company to verify it." "They're closed," Lucas yelled, tears streaming down his face now. "We can't get anyone until Monday. By then the money is gone." Winston looked at me, his eyes pleading for the first time in my life. The arrogance was gone. He was just an old man who had bet the farm on a horse with 3 legs. "Antonia, how do you have these emails? Who do you work for?" I stood there, the power dynamic shifting so violently it made the air crackle. They were terrified. They were ruined. And they were looking at the daughter they had called a failure to save them. I walked over to the table and picked up the bottle of Dom Perignon that Winston had bought for the celebration. It was unopened. "You asked me earlier what I do," I said, running my thumb over the foil label. "You said I was just figuring life out. You said I was playing pretend." I looked at Winston. "I don't work for Vanguard, Dad." I paused, letting the silence stretch until it was painful. "But I know exactly who does." "Who?" Winston breathed. I smiled, and it was the sharpest thing in the room. "Me." "You," Winston repeated, the word tumbling out of his mouth like a clumsy stone. He looked at me, then at the bottle of Dom Perignon in my hand, and then back at my face. He laughed, but it was a dry, brittle sound. "Antonia, this isn't the time for your games. You know who works there, who? Some receptionist you met at a coffee shop." "No, Dad," I said, setting the bottle down on the table with a heavy thud. The sound echoed in the silent room. "I don't know the receptionist, but I do know the board of directors. I know them because I appointed them." Lucas shook his head, his face blotchy with panic and confusion. "What are you talking about? You're a freelancer. You consult for nobody knows who." "I consult for Apex Holdings," I corrected him, my voice gaining strength, filling the room that had suffocated me for so long. "Actually, I am Apex Holdings. I founded the firm 6 years ago. We specialize in distressed asset acquisition and corporate restructuring." I reached into my bag and pulled out the blue folder I had been guarding all night. I tossed it onto the table. It slid across the polished wood and came to a stop right in front of Winston's plate of cold roast beef. "Open it," I commanded. "Why?" Enstan's hands shook as he opened the folder. He stared at the documents. It was the deed of sale, the acquisition summary, the press release scheduled for Monday morning. "Apex Holdings completes acquisition of Vanguard Logistics. Signed, Antonia last name, CEO." "You," Winston looked up, his eyes wide, struggling to process the shift in reality. "You bought the company." 2 weeks ago," I said. "We've been auditing the books for a month. That's how we found Miller. That's how I knew about the fraud. And that's why I know for a fact that Lucas isn't a regional director." I turned to Lucas. He was slumped in his chair, looking small. The arrogance that had inflated him an hour ago had leaked out, leaving behind a terrified boy. "I own the building you walk into every day, Lucas," I said, my voice cold. "I own the servers you send your emails from. I own the payroll system that cuts your checks. And as of 6:00 p.m. tonight, I am the one who decides who stays and who goes." This can't be real, Philippa whispered, speaking for the first time. She looked at me with a mixture of awe and fear. Antonia, you did this. I did, I said. While you were all making fun of my little consulting gig, I was building an empire. While you were mocking my rental apartment, I was buying skyscrapers. I didn't say anything because I wanted to see if you would ever value me, not for my title. But tonight, I looked at Winston. Tonight, I got my answer. Winston was reading the document again, his finger tracing my signature. CEO, he muttered, you own it, you own him. I own the company, I corrected. And right now, that company is the only thing standing between you and homelessness. Winston dropped the folder. The loan, he gasped. The wire transfer. It's scheduled, if Miller is a fraud, if the account is fake. The money will disappear, I said, and the bank will take this house. Panic, raw and unfiltered, finally broke through Winston's pride. He stood up, knocking his chair over. Antonia, you have to help. You have resources. You said you have resources. Stop it. Stop the transfer. Why should I asked, crossing my arms. You just told me to get out of your house. You told me I wasn't welcome in this family. You told me I was a failure. I didn't know, Winston stammered. I was upset. I was protecting your brother. Protecting him from the truth, I shot back. You've spent your whole life protecting him, pumping him up with hot air until he floated right into a con artist's trap. You did this, Dad. You and your obsession with status. Please, Philippa said, tears running down her face. Antonia, please, this is our home. I looked at my mother. For years, she had stood by and let Winston belittle me. She had nodded along, offered me leftovers, and asked when I would get a real job. But she was still my mother. And this house, despite the memories, it was where I grew up. I sighed, the anger draining away, leaving just exhaustion. I can stop it, I said. Winston let out a sob of relief. How? How can you stop a bank transfer on a Saturday night? Because I own the entity that flagged the account, I said, pulling out my phone again. Miller's account was frozen by the FBI an hour ago because my legal team handed over the evidence. Any transfer attempting to hit that account will be bounced, provided a verified victim authorizes the stop. I dialed a number. I put it on speaker. David. I'm here, boss. David's voice came through, crisp and professional. What's the status? We have a situation with a pending transfer from a Winston last name to the flagged Miller account. It's a fraudulent inducement. I need you to conference in the bank's fraud department and issue a block code. Authorization code Alpha 9 Victor. Understood, David said. Flagging it as part of the Apex investigation, the transfer will be canceled. The funds will remain in the originator's account. Anything else? Yes, I said, looking directly at Lucas. Regarding the personnel file for Lucas' last name. Lucas flinched. Tony, wait. Process the termination, I said into the phone. Effective immediately. Cause, gross negligence and attempted participation in vendor fraud. Wait, Lucas screamed. You can't fire me, I'm your brother. I looked at him, my expression unmoving. You tried to embezzle $50,000, Lucas. You were willing to leverage Dad's house to do it. If you were anyone else, I'd have you prosecuted. Being my brother is the only reason you're not going to jail on Monday. But you are certainly not working for me. Copy that, David said. Termination processed. Severance denied. Access badges deactivated. Should I send security to clear his desk? No, I said, holding Lucas's gaze. He can pick up his box from the lobby. I hung up the phone. The room was silent. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and Winston's heavy, ragged breathing. He sank onto the sofa, looking 20 years older. The director was gone. The golden child was unemployed. The disappointment was the only one standing tall. You fired him, Winston whispered, staring at the floor. He fired himself, I said. I just signed the paperwork. I picked up my purse. The air in the house felt stale, used up. I didn't want the roast beef. I didn't want the apology that wouldn't come. I'm leaving now, I said. Your money is safe, Dad. The house is safe. But don't ever call me a failure again, and don't ever tell me I'm just figuring life out. I figured it out a long time ago. I walked to the front door. Neither of them moved to stop me. Neither of them said a word. They were frozen in the wreckage of their own egos, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to fix it for them. I opened the door to the cold night air, and it felt like freedom. The fallout was swift, quiet, and absolute. By Monday morning, the news of the Apex Holdings acquisition was on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. My picture was there, a professional headshot taken last year, under the headline, "The Quiet Giant: How Antonia last name built a logistics empire from the shadows." I sat in the corner office of Vanguard Logistics, the real executive suite on the 14th floor, not the server room Lucas had bragged about. The view was indeed spectacular. The Chicago River wound through the city like a steel ribbon, reflecting the gray sky. My assistant, a sharp young woman named Sarah, knocked on the door. "Ms. Last Name, there's Mr. Lucas' last name in the lobby. He says he needs to speak with you. Security won't let him up." I turned my chair around. I had expected this. "Let him up," I said, "but have security escort him." 10 minutes later, Lucas stood in my doorway. He wasn't wearing his suit. He was wearing jeans and a windbreaker. He looked tired. He looked small. "Tony," he said, his voice cracking. "Antonia," I corrected gently. "Or Ms. Last Name, considering where we are." He swallowed hard. "Antonia, look, I know I messed up. I know I was an idiot, but Mom is a wreck. Dad hasn't spoken in 2 days. He just sits in the den staring at the wall." "He's in shock," I said. "His worldview collapsed. It takes time to rebuild." "He's ashamed," Lucas said, stepping into the room. "He feels like he lost everything." "He didn't lose everything," I said. "He kept his house. He kept his retirement. He just lost his delusions." Lucas rubbed the back of his neck. "And me, I lost my job. I have a mortgage on that condo, Tony. I have car payments. I can't be unemployed, not now." He looked at me with that familiar expression, the one he used when we were kids and he wanted me to do his homework. The expectation of rescue. "I need a job," he said. "You own the company. You can just undo it, put me in a different department. Marketing, sales, anything." I looked at him, feeling a pang of the old guilt. It would be so easy. I could snap my fingers, give him a salary, and restore the peace. Winston would be happy. Mom would be relieved. We could go back to pretending. But pretending was what had almost cost them their home. "No," I said. Lucas blinked. "What?" "No," I repeated firmly. "I can't hire you, Lucas. You're a liability. You fell for a basic phishing scam because you were greedy and arrogant. You didn't vet the deal. You didn't protect the assets. If you worked for me, I couldn't trust you." "So that's it." Anger flared in his eyes again. "You're just going to leave me out in the cold, for revenge." "It's not revenge," I said, standing up and walking to the window. "It's business, and it's love, actually. If I bail you out now, you'll never learn. You'll just wait for the next person to save you." I turned back to him. "But I will do this. I'll pay for a career counselor, a good one. Someone who can help you find a job you're actually qualified for, not one you think you're entitled to. And I'll cover your mortgage for 3 months. That's it. After that, you're on your own." Lucas stared at me. He wanted to argue. He wanted to scream. But he looked around the office, the mahogany desk, the awards on the shelf, the sheer weight of my reality, and he realized he had no leverage. 3 months, he muttered. 3 months, I confirmed. Take it or leave it. He nodded, defeated. I'll take it. He turned to leave, but stopped at the door. Dad wants to see you, he said without looking back. He wants to apologize. I think he means it. I'll see him when I'm ready, I said. Lucas walked out. I didn't see Winston for another 2 weeks. When I finally drove out to the suburbs, the dynamic had shifted permanently. I didn't park around the block. I parked my Porsche right in the driveway. Dinner was quiet. There was no wine, there was no bragging. Winston looked frazzled. Humble, he asked me questions about the market. He asked me about interest rates. He listened when I spoke. At the end of the night, as I was putting on my coat, Winston stopped me in the hallway. "Antonia," he said, his voice was rough. I was proud of the wrong things for a long time." I looked at him. I saw the regret in his eyes. It didn't erase the years of neglect, but it was a start. "I know, Dad," I said. You're a shark," he said, a small, sad smile touching his lips. "I always said you needed to be tougher. Turns out you were the toughest one in the house." "I had to be," I said, "to survive this family." He flinched, but he nodded. "I deserve that." I hugged him briefly. It wasn't a warm, fuzzy movie hug. It was a truce. "I have to go," I said. "I have a meeting in Tokyo on Monday." "Tokyo," he repeated, shaking his head in disbelief. "Safe travels, CEO." I walked out to my car. As I drove away, watching the house shrink in the rearview mirror, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. The heavy weight of their expectations had finally lifted, replaced by the only validation that mattered. My own. I turned onto the highway, the city lights of Chicago welcoming me back. I had a company to run. I had a future to build. And for the first time, I was driving toward it with nothing holding me back.